All right. Happy engineer, welcome back. And Megan, I'm so happy you're here. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Zach. I'm happy to be here.
We need to quickly back up right before we hit record today. We were both lamenting the fact that we're sitting inside recording this podcast, which is super fun and awesome to do. But it's one of those days in Michigan here. It's early October and it's like 80 degrees and sunny. And we were like, maybe we should be outside.
Yeah,
And it hurts. What
it
would you be
does.
doing outside if you weren't here with me, Megan? If you could be doing anything right now, where would you go?
I love all the things outside. Afternoon golf, maybe a run. All things are better outside.
Mm, everything is better outside. I think a lot of engineers appreciate and agree with that. You also told me that everything is better with something else when we were prepping for the show today. I wrote this down.
I
And I'm
did.
enjoying a cup right now. But is it true for you that everything is better with coffee? Is that right?
Everything is better with coffee. Yes.
So there we
Cream
go.
or black? What's your style?
This is black coffee.
Okay.
If it's a high quality roast and it's prepared, it's brewed well,
Yep.
then black coffee is all you need. If it's,
Uh,
I mean, I don't mean to insult anybody, but like diner, just not good
You
coffee.
need a little half and half.
Yeah, you gotta pull something in
Yeah.
that.
Yep.
Yeah.
I'm with you.
But okay, all right. I'm glad we're on the same page. Enough wisdom already on this episode. You could stop listening. Everything is better outside and everything is better with coffee. We could just end it here, but we won't because Megan, you have so much to bring from your career journey. An executive in engineering, currently vice president, and a long winding road to get here. And I want to unpack that whole journey because so many engineering leaders really do aspire to high levels of leadership and impact. And at some point in that growth curve, bump into one or multiple really hard things. And in some cases, give up on that dream or feel like it's not possible for me, or you name it, things that get in the way of us landing that next promotion or creating the impact we really want to make in engineering and in technology and in the people that we work with and who work for us. So take me back to the beginning for you, early career days. How would you describe your mindset about career building as a young engineer? If you could go back and talk to Megan right out of college, what would she say about this whole career thing?
Oh my gosh. So I don't think I really even understood what it meant to be an engineer when I graduated from college, right? Have a couple internships and then you start working full time and you realize that it's not all fun and games, but there's a lot of really cool things to do. So early in my career, I had this growth mindset from day one. Like I started as an engineer at Whirlpool in top load washers. And I think one of my first questions to my boss at the time was, how long until I can be promoted to project engineer? And what do I have to do to get there? What's the hardest project you can give me? Because I want to work on that one.
Hmm. Megan, where did that growth mindset start for you? Is that something you've had your whole life, or was there something you learned in college? Like, how did you have that on day one? So many people don't.
I think that was just intrinsic for me. I really enjoyed the challenge, having something to work towards. Like I needed a goal at all times.
Was the goal obvious, or were there times where you really weren't sure? You knew you should be going for something, but it was hard to decide what that goal actually was.
No, the goal was not always obvious, especially as a young engineer when you start to look around and there are some leaders that you really aspire and look up to. And then others you're like, yeah, that's not quite what I want to be when I grow up, so to speak. It's easy to lose your way when you're unsure what the path is. Like, what experiences do you need? Not
Hmm.
necessarily what projects do you have to complete, but I started looking at it through the lens of experiences versus what roles did I have to get myself into, if you will. I started to ask different questions.
Experiences versus roles. This is
Hmm.
an interesting distinction, and I really agree with what you're saying that it's about the experience, not the title or the role of the project. but it's
Hmm.
not always obvious why that distinction matters, or like, what do you mean by an experience? So can you unpack that a little bit? What are the types of experiences versus, hey, you need to do this job or this project to be ready for the next level?
Again, early in my Whirlpool career, as a young engineer, when you're running a project, one experience that you may not have is managing the budget for the whole department. You may have no exposure to that budget, right? You just go to your boss and say, hey, can I spend X dollars for prototypes for my project?
Hmm.
But you don't have any visibility to how that impacts the overall team. So managing a budget, for example, for a whole team is very different than managing a budget for your small piece or your project.
Hmm.
So to me, that there's a difference there between your project impact and the department impact, and having both of those experiences.
What would you say to a young engineer who finds an experience gap? Let's pull this example. Hey,
Mhm.
I've never owned the budget for the department. That's not a part of my job description, and maybe it's one or two levels above me before that would be a part of
Yep.
my job description. So what am I supposed to do? How do I get these things when they're not a part of my job? This is resistance that I hear from engineers all the time when I'm coaching. It's like, okay, yeah, that'd be great, but that's not part of my scope. It's not
Yeah.
something that I get to do. So how do I cross this catch 22 chasm? Like, you can't do
Yeah.
these jobs without these experiences, but you can't get these experiences without the jobs. How do you
Yeah.
solve that?
You have to be willing to swim outside of your lane, right? You have to be willing to ask the questions and put yourself out there. If it's not your direct leader that you need to have a conversation with, then go have a conversation with your leader's leader, or whoever is responsible for that experience that you want to have. Like, you simply have to have the courage to put yourself out there and say, hey, I want to learn about this. I want to learn about this. What's the worst thing that's going to happen? Maybe they tell you no. Probably not, though, right?
Yeah.
More than likely, they're going to be excited that you want to learn something new. But if you
I,
don't ask, you certainly won't get the
yes.
experience.
You already have no. If you don't ask, you'll never get a yes.
Yeah.
Really important. I remember in my early career days asking all the time if I could sit in on meetings that I had no business being in, if I could watch my boss do stuff. Like, the budget example is funny. I vividly remember asking one of my bosses if I could just sit over their shoulder the next time they ran the budget for our team,
Hmm.
because I just wanted to see what the heck was going on.
Yeah. What was
Um,
the answer?
Oh, absolutely. Yes. Every time. Now, okay,
Yeah.
not always on the meeting thing. Sometimes I asked for access to rooms that I wasn't allowed to be in. They're going to talk
Right.
about things that are either currently confidential, or there's a certain audience understanding. It's not like everybody can just bring whoever they want
Yeah.
into the room. But on the shadowing side, the only time I would ever get what would feel like a no was more of like a not right now. It wasn't a no. It was just, I'm busy, or hey, I really, you need to go focus on X before we can do that together. Let's
Yeah.
make it happen sometime down the road. But what do you think then, Megan, from your, again, kind of early stages, those first couple promotions? You're still in IC, you're
Hmm.
moving up at Whirlpool, the career ladder: engineer, project engineer, senior engineer. Every company has their version of the levels. What are the biggest barriers to growth in those early stages before you hit kind of middle management? If we were just taking IC and IC plus type roles, where do people get stuck from your estimation, both doing it yourself and now as an executive looking back on this?
I think there's a couple of things. I think our mindset often holds us back, that fear of failure, and also simply not having the conversation. If you don't talk to your leader about the fact that you're a senior engineer today and you want to be a lead engineer, that you actually want to do that, you want that opportunity, how do they know? Like, you have to set some expectations.
Hmm. I'm thinking about that training that HR gives all the time on crucial conversations. Have you
Yeah.
done that? You read that book?
I have.
Yeah. Really popular. And it's a great book, by the way. I think Anybody who reads it will get value from it. But one of the things, as you answered that, and it connects these dots for me, a thing that's frustrating is that we want to solve some of these problems for engineers at any level by giving them training and tools like crucial conversations. But nobody asks the question, why are we not having any conversations? Like, why are we lacking the courage to at least go have some kind of conversation? Even if you don't follow the 5-step framework of crucial conversations and the pool of shared meaning and all that, like, who cares about the framework? We're not talking about it at all.
Right.
That's a different problem. And so what would you give somebody if you were coaching a young engineer or mentoring them and they were really struggling with that courage to have the conversation, and maybe they're caught up in like, I don't know what to say, or I don't know how to do this, or what's the thing you would say to encourage them that, like, look, here's how you get over that threshold. Here's how you get out of fear and into action.
For me, when I find myself nervous or hesitant, even still today, that happens, we're all human, write it down. Write it down and read it. And if it helps you, take that note with you to the conversation, right? Do you ever get nervous? Like, and then you like literally can't say the words that you need to say? Write it down. And it's never as scary as you think it's going to be when it's over.
Yeah. We do these challenges in our coaching program we call C4 challenges. It's crush comfort and create courage. And one of the common themes when people finish these challenges and we say, okay, well, how'd it go? What did you learn about yourself? What did you learn about your career? Every single time there's this breakthrough awareness of like, it's not actually as scary as I thought it was going to be. It wasn't as bad as I thought. Our mind has a way of really building that up. So let's come back to your thread then. Here you're moving up the ranks, you're getting promotions as an IC. When was the first manager job for you?
Let's see. I was leading a couple of people as a senior engineer and a lead engineer. Then I went into an engineering manager role and had a larger team, 8 or 9 maybe.
What would you say shifts the most between being an individual contributor working on projects and leading a team of 5 people plus that engineers really need to pay attention to?
You are no longer the one doing the day-to-day work, right? You are trusting your people to do their best work. So you have to be willing to let go of that day-to-day control and know that your people are doing the value-added stuff.
I'm going to be devil's advocate, Megan.
I love it.
I get that. I agree with you. That all makes sense. But it's not so simple to lead that way. What do you think actually makes it so hard to make that shift? You know, you can hear yourself say that, and lots of people have read the books or listened to the podcast. They're like, okay, I got it. I'm not the person who delivers all the results anymore. And yet they're not letting go. They still want to control every outcome. Their ego is invested in this. They don't trust, you know, they're micromanaging, whatever it is. The knowledge of it's not up to me doesn't reflect in the behaviors of how they manage and lead the team. So where's the disconnect? Why is it so hard?
Gosh, that's a tough one.
Was it hard for you?
I really, no, it wasn't. And I truly believe it's because at that time I had a really great team. And this goes in both directions, right? Being a leader and having a challenging team, being a leader and having a really great team, or even being an individual contributor and having what you perceive as a challenging leader or a really great leader, right? That affects your mindset and your approach to every day, to every task. I've always had a very optimistic mindset. I believe that is a part of my success because I walk into those situations And every new role, every new team that I've had, I walk into that with an open mind. These folks are here for the right reason. And I'm going to get to know each of them and
Yeah.
build a relationship so that we can be successful together. That perspective is simply so important. I mean, that we talk about that fixed mindset versus a growth mindset. That's terminology that everyone is familiar with. I like that terminology,
Yeah.
but I genuinely have always had an optimistic perspective on work or life, however you want to sum it up. I believe that is a key factor.
There's multiple important points to consider as an engineering manager and leader. One, the importance of building a great team. And I'll just add to that, if you get promoted or you change companies, change industry, and you inherit a team, it's really easy to just settle and assume that it is what it is. This is what I've got. And I just reject that thought. It's like, no. You are responsible to either help that team level up or have the hard conversations with whoever you need to have them with to go
Right.
create that A-player team. That's your job. That's as the manager. It's like, you don't just settle for the team you're given. Would you enthusiastically rehire these people knowing what you know now? It's like, if not, take action. Let's do something. It doesn't mean fire everybody, but let's make sure we're giving everyone a chance to either hit the standard and be an A player or find a slot where they can be or get them off the bus. All right, optimism. It's easy to say, so far Megan's story, she's just naturally a growth mindset person. She's optimistic. Everything seems to be easy for Megan. So Zach, the key lesson, if you want to make it to vice president of engineering, is just be good and have it easy. And then that's all there is. So is that the takeaway, Megan, or am I missing part of the story?
There's more to it. I am optimistic and I remain optimistic, but real life happens to all people. Real life has happened to me. And it's important for everyone to understand that you are a whole person. This kind of bleeds into my thoughts on work-life balance, but 2018 and 2019 were very challenging years for me personally. I experienced some loss and a divorce, and those things are all real life, right? Everybody has instances where bad things happen or hard things happen. Maybe you're at a place where you are given a lot of grace at work and at home, and you're able to kind of ebb and flow through that hard time and recover, and everything's good. Through my real life experiences, I also was let go from a job that I thought I really liked.
Wow.
Yeah. And I don't think that it's something people really talk about all that often. It's easy to feel shame when you get fired. Maybe it's a little embarrassing and you're just angry. I certainly was. But I walked away from that realizing that not every role, not every organization, not every boss, however you want to frame that up, not every single position you find yourself in will be a good fit. And that is okay.
There's 2 or 3 really important things to address that engineering leaders I know get bump up against and struggle with through life. So first of all, 2018. So where were you working at that time?
I had left Whirlpool after 13 years, which also big change, right? You make a huge decision to leave really all I had ever known. Mm-hmm. And I was working at a company called Landscape Forms, and I had been there a couple of years.
Okay. A manager level role, or were you higher than that at that time?
Yep. Nope. I was a manager level there, leading their engineering team.
Okay.
Yep.
And so then, whatever you're willing to share, Megan, what started the real life experience? What happened?
In 2018, I had some back-to-back experiences. I lost my father, and then I had a stillborn, and those were within a couple of months of each other. Yeah, like that's real life. I took my maternity leave and went back to work and thought I was okay. And then all of a sudden was feeling really unsettled. There were some organizational changes, and I found myself with a new team and under a new team, and it did not fit. It just flat out didn't fit. And shortly after that, I was let go.
First of all, I'm so sorry. Those are incredibly challenging experiences. And Megan, how did dealing with that on the personal side impact your ability to even show up and do the work at all? I mean, that's really heavy. I mean, I've been through some stuff, but not like that. And it was hard enough for me to kind of keep my work happy face on and deal with my divorce and depression, like trying to keep those two things separate. But I can't imagine what you described. So how did that show up for you? What was that like, trying to juggle this personal trauma and the grief and the stress with still doing a job?
I think I got lost. I was showing up to work. I felt engaged, but in the background, I think I was just going through the motions because that's what I was supposed to do. And as things started to become unsettled, it became more real, right? You find some clarity, the fog lifts a little bit, and you're like, oh, this seat at the table isn't the right one for me anymore.
Did you feel that way at the time of being let go, or did that being laid off feel unfair and unjust and maybe trigger some anger? Or like, how did you feel towards that situation when it happened?
I was definitely angry. It did not feel fair. Looking back, I wish it would have been differently. I wish the conversations would have happened differently, but they didn't. And you can't go back and do anything about that. You process it and you accept it and you move on. What I really want people to understand is that top performers get let go. You can show up every day, work really hard, meet all your objectives, and you still may not be sitting at the right table. And it's okay.
That's the tweetable, the tweetable moment. Like, I'm so glad you said that. I'm thinking of multiple amazing engineering leaders that I've coached who are in the either wrong place at the wrong time. They worked at Amazon or they worked at Meta during big layoffs and their whole department got cut. And these are incredibly talented engineers who got let go, and others where something personal happened and they weren't able to be that top performer the way they always can, which is completely understandable. And something happens, and then the shame. There's two words you said that I want to unpack with your experience through this. One was shame, the other was grace. And maybe I'll do them in the reverse order. So grace, either how you need to receive it when you're the one going through real life, or if you're the leader and someone on your team is going through real life. What does grace look like in the workplace that is good and healthy and fruitful to bring versus maybe something that we want to call grace, but we're actually enabling, or it's no longer the right approach and we need to take action and we're just avoiding the situation? Can you unpack that from your perspective?
From a leader's perspective, having managed different teams and people for a number of years, I've had folks on my team experience real life. For me, I don't ask details, but I need to know what they need to feel supported. In my current role with FreeAsk, we had a teammate experience a loss, and my direction to him was simply take the time you need and let us know what we can do at work so that these tasks don't fall behind. Like, the team is here to support you. To me, it's more important that they feel connected and supported and not worried about missing a couple days of work. It's a couple of days. They're not asking for 6 months. That's a different conversation, right? There is nothing we are doing so critical that being gone for a week or even two, our mental health is more important than anything we're doing at work.
Yeah. Well, and from that individual's point of view, to your point earlier, maybe you do worst case scenario, get let go Well, guess what? There's light on the other side of that fear as well. And so
There is.
prioritizing your mental health and emotional health and family and spiritual life, whatever it needs to be,
Yep.
is so important. So then, Megan, if someone is an engineering manager, director, VP, there's someone on the team going through it, but they're not recovering.
Hmm.
I've had multiple clients in this situation where they've got someone on their team. They want to extend grace and support, but that first week goes by, that second week goes by. And it's not that they're on vacation the whole time, not at the office, but they're continuing to lag. They're constantly, their head is out of the game. They're not performing. They're not recovering. And then it gets to that point where now we can't necessarily say take all the time you need anymore,
Yeah.
because that reasonable period of healing and recovery has passed, at least in the eyes of you as the leader, but the
Yeah.
individual hasn't overcome it yet, which is no judgment. It's just the reality that we're facing. So it's like business needs and how much grace do we extend. What's your wisdom around how to approach that? Is there any guideline or any way that you think about what conversation to have and when someone's going through it?
When I feel like when we've gotten to that point, my approach is to have what is maybe the uncomfortable conversation, but to ask, are you okay? How are you feeling? From my seat, these things are falling behind, and I want to help you be successful.
Yeah.
So it's not an attack. And I think you have to approach it from a human perspective, not your work's not getting done perspective.
Yeah. I think this is such a hard balance. Thanks for sharing. And I don't know that there's a single right answer.
Yeah.
But as a leader, it's so important. So then if we come back to your experience, you're going through incredibly hard real life pain and trauma and grief, and then you get let go. And you mentioned the shame that can come with that. What was the experience of shame like for you?
It's almost hard to talk about, right? There's this like embarrassment of like, I've always been so successful and I left this career. Then I got fired. Like, what just happened? After the initial anger is over, you have this realization of maybe I wasn't in the right spot at the right time. It took me a few months to get there, right? But you move on. You find something different that fits and feels good. I go back to that whole idea of real life happens to everybody. So it's still something that, gosh, even talking about it today, it like brings back those feelings of like, I can't believe that happened. It stings.
Yeah. The process of going from anger, it stings, it hurts, to, hey, maybe I was in the wrong seat, to then turning over a new leaf to a vision again. Like I see myself the way I used to see myself. What would be for you the thing that tipped the scale? So you're kind of coming out of that trough. We might think about the grief cycle, it's like we're going through this and you start to come back out again. Is there anything that you remember that started to shift and change where you saw yourself again as that top performer and you got your career back on track? And it's only, here we are 4 or 5 years later and now you're vice president. So clearly you got back on track. But what shifted? Where did you feel that energy change?
Gosh, I'd hate to hang my head on this, but I'm going to go back to that optimistic perspective. Bad things happen. That was then, and this is now. Like, I truly believe I have no choice but to move forward. I know what I want, so go get it. And I know that maybe sounds oversimplified, but you're not going to get different answers unless you ask different questions. And you're certainly not going to get a new job or a different job or a promotion if you don't put yourself out there. So through that shame and anger, that shakes your confidence. I continued to tell myself, like, that happened. it clearly wasn't a good fit. If that's really how they felt, I don't want to be there either. I'm going to go find where I do belong.
When you talk about having this thought process and rebuilding or reconnecting to the optimism inside you, is there any particular action or ritual maybe that you do that helps you get to that place? Is this a journaling exercise or meditation or some sort of visualization, or how are you actually doing it? It's like, I understand what you're
Yeah.
saying, but sometimes it's useful to just see, like, in real life, what was happening that got you reconnected to that.
My personal source of truth and calmness has always been running.
Okay.
Yeah. So all things are better outside. All things are better with coffee, right? Wake up, have a cup of coffee, go for a run.
Go for a run.
Yeah.
I love
I
that.
realize that doesn't work for everybody. You mentioned other things, meditation, journaling, going for a walk, find your thing,
Find your
right?
thing.
Yep.
Yeah. My wife's is riding horses. We have a horse, and I told you she's at the barn today as we're talking, enjoying the sunshine and riding. And she's been through real life. It's her story to tell another time, but riding the horse is her place, to go and get away. And it's
Yep.
that meditative place. And I love the horse. That's a really good one. But I also just sit at the beach with an empty journal and just start writing. I love
Yep.
to write. So, Megan, you're an executive now. We probably need to do a whole nother episode to talk about being an executive in engineering versus, an IC or even middle management positions. But if you were going to say the one or two things that really stand out to you as different to be successful as an executive versus earlier in your career, what stands out?
A couple things that come to mind are being willing to make decisions. Even if they're the wrong ones, you got to make the decision and you got to stand behind it. The second is being courageous enough to have a different opinion than everybody in the room. I guess I say courageous because maybe you have that opinion, but you have to be willing to say it.
actually doing.
Yeah, I realize I missed that part. Yeah, like you're going to find yourself surrounded with other really brilliant people, and everybody's going to have a unique perspective on whatever the topic is, right? How this project should go, or how this team should be structured, or what we should spend the money on. If you disagree or have a different opinion to share, that's your responsibility, right? As an executive, as a leader, your responsibility is to share your opinion. That's part of what got you there and why you're in the role. So if you think we need to spend the money on project A instead of project B, you better speak up.
I'm so glad you said those two things, because literally decisiveness and courage. My company is named the Oasis of Courage for a reason. And I firmly believe those two qualities and a handful of others are essential if you want to experience rapid acceleration of your career success, but the impact of the role. Like, if you want to actually make a difference and do something meaningful, you got to have it.
Yep.
And nothing is harder than to see, for me as a coach, right? Nothing's harder than to see an engineering leader, for example, just got off a call with a senior manager, great resume, great experience, but been stuck at this level for 5 or 6 years and really getting frustrated, beating his head against the wall, wondering why it's not happening. Other people are getting promoted. He's not getting promoted. We're having this conversation. And we laid out the entire plan, everything, found some really big blind spots and barriers for him and showed him how we could support him through that. And said, all right, are you ready to do this? You ready to take action and go solve these problems and have the courage to step into it? And his answer, no judgment, his answer was, let me think about it. It's like, well, think about what? Like, what is there to think about? We just completely laid out exactly what's going on. And you told me just a minute ago, this has been a problem for 5 years. And it's that pattern of indecision, that hesitancy that we build as engineers. Maybe it's because we're trained in FMEAs and we don't want to let anything happen that could possibly go wrong. But this isn't a life on the line type of situation. This is a very simple decision. Learn to value your time. let's go, get started. There's nothing to think about. But
Yeah. And making mistakes is okay. As engineers, think about the number of tests that you've completed that didn't go the way you thought, but you learn from those failures and try again. That is also really important. Like, you need to be in an environment where it's safe to fail.
yeah, so good. Megan, I almost hesitate to ask this last question because it may be the kind of thing we need a lot more time to unpack, but I just can't have you here and not get at least a little perspective from a female engineer who has succeeded at the highest level. So often there's things that are just either HR, we can't talk about it directly. It's hard, it's awkward. Zach is a white male engineer trying to talk about these topics. It's difficult, but you can speak to it from your own experience. So I'm curious, for the young female engineer out there, or that engineering manager who wants to make it to that director and executive level, and she's facing something that's different than what the men face in their career path. Would you be willing to share some of your own either experience with that or encouragement for that person in how to approach that, and what has helped you be successful in your own path?
I've always felt like it's Megan and the boys, the only girl in many engineering classes in school. And throughout my career, I was often the only woman in a room with other engineers or engineering leaders. And even today, I lead a team of all men. Don't let anybody tell you that your opinion doesn't count. I was told as a young engineer that I didn't know what I was talking about, or you get interrupted in meetings. And those things do happen. And personally, for me, it just kind of fueled my personal fire to prove them wrong. If you face those things in your day-to-day career, I would argue that, maybe you're not surrounded by the right people. You do have to, from time to time, simply be willing to push through. Don't accept being told that you don't know because you're a woman. Push back on that as hard as you can. It's so sad to me that this is still a real topic.
A thing. Yeah.
That this is a thing. I'm having all sorts of
I understand. Please.
having all sorts of real life flashbacks of this stuff. And this is another topic that's almost hard to verbalize, to talk about, even as far as having blonde hair and blue eyes and the anti-stereotypical engineer, however you want to say that, right?
Yeah, right.
I'm female, I'm blonde, and I have blue eyes. I would encourage young women to stand up for themselves and find partners, friends at work that will also be an advocate for them. For example, if we were sitting in a meeting and I was explaining a project and somebody continued to talk over me, you, Zach, as my advocate, could be like, hey, man, let Megan finish her thought. Yeah. Because it's perceived a lot differently when somebody else steps in versus if she were to advocate for herself, be an advocate for herself.
Even more so as a peer versus the boss always having to be the one to do it. Yeah. So for all the men listening, first of all, if you feel any of those tinglies or uncomfortableness of the topic, I totally get that. But happy engineer, it doesn't matter. We all have a role to play in this topic, and be that advocate, be that support. And for the ladies, don't let anybody tell you otherwise. And Megan's a great example. I'm thinking back, we interviewed Myra Nawabi on the podcast. Her story is incredible. People told her you'll never be an engineer, and she is absolutely crushing it. So many people, but it's still a thing. To Megan's your point, it's still a thing. So, well, thank you for sharing that. And happy engineer, if you want to hear more from Megan on this topic, send me a note and we'll get her back and we'll talk more about it. But we got to land the plane. It's that time, and I'm so sad because there's probably 10 more hours of amazing pieces of your journey, Megan, to unpack. But thank you for sharing this. If someone does want to connect with you, maybe they have a question or need some support in their career path and want to see that success like you've seen, where can they reach out and connect with you the easiest?
LinkedIn. That is the easy spot. We can put my profile in the show notes, I think you said. It's a great place.
Awesome. So we will do that. We'll link up Megan in the show notes. Go check that out and mention to her in your connection request that you heard her on the Happy Engineer podcast, so she knows you're not just a total stranger who's connecting, and she could prioritize that conversation. But Megan, thank you for your vulnerability and just being so open and honest about your story. And real life happens to top performers, and it's okay. Top performers get laid off too. So many important things to take away from this. You've experienced it. You know it now as a vice president of engineering. You've known it for a long time, that if we want to have the life of our dreams, the career of our dreams, questions lead, answers follow. And you mentioned it earlier. Great questions really matter. So, Megan, what's the question that you would lead the Happy Engineer with coming out of this conversation?
I would ask, what projects really bring them joy? And I say that because we all work on projects that we don't want to, whether it's at home or at work, but we also should have an opportunity to work on things that truly bring us joy. And I think that is another factor of how we find success, is working on things that truly bring us joy and happiness. So I would challenge folks to look at their day-to-day and find projects, whether it's home or work, that they really enjoy.
Amazing. What projects in your whole life will bring you joy? Megan, thanks for being here. This has been awesome.
Thank you so much.